Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. This week, we've got Barcelona Group 4 once again. However, there are two key differences. This time, instead of a fuel-saving race, it's a tire-saving race, and it's the no chicane layout. Let's get into it. The car of the week is the Jag F-Type. The last time we had this combination, the F-Type was the anti-meta car then as well. This time, it's not a fuel-saving race, however, and instead, it's a tire-saving race. The F-Type isn't great at saving tires, but since there's a required pit stop, taking tires doesn't add that much time. And since it's powerful enough to pass the McLaren in the straights, and it's nimble enough to pass anything in the corners, it's still a very good choice. Even though you're going to find the F-Type in the top 10 and other places within the top 100, the 650S and the Citroën are definitely the meta cars for the race. With the tune I'm going to give you, I was able to put it in 38th place globally, but it's definitely good enough for at the very least a couple more tenths. The McLaren is insanely good and extremely fast. The Citroën, however, can save tires like no other. Fellow YouTuber Wind, who you've probably seen on the leaderboards many times, he's an incredibly fast British driver, actually made this tune or something very similar to this for the SLS. Not knowing what the heck I was doing, I just went ahead and took those settings, put them on the Jag, and then barely adjusted the rear expansion. Luckily, it worked, but full credit to Wind for the original concept for this tune. So I'm learning only recently that if you brake in this game on the curbs, it can make the ABS act pretty strange. So you really want to straddle the curb on this part. As soon as you get past the grass, straddle the curb. Don't try to brake on it like I'm doing right here. Looking at what I believe is a digital flag marker, we're going to brake as soon as we get all the way past it. Start turning in once you get past this concrete pathway and then continue downshifting until you're in third gear, trying to get just your left tires on the curbing. Continue steering to the right until you get to the beginning of the red and white curbing on the left, and then turn in, lift off as needed, and get back on the throttle as soon as you can. It's okay if you put two tires on the green, but if you hit the lip, it's going to make the car act kind of funny, so be very careful. Turn right again once we get to the red and white curbing once more, and then lift off just a little bit. When you see that orange in the distance, you can get back on the throttle, and you shouldn't be experiencing too much understeer with this car. You want to make sure that you're not steering too much, so if you hear the tires screeching, let off the steering just a little bit, and this turn does open up a little bit, so you should be safe, even if you get on that throttle really early. Again, trying to straddle the curbing for the next braking zone, it's really hard to approximate, but it's about 15 to 20 meters before the bridge. There are some tire marks on the green, and right at the beginning of those is where I like to brake, but they're very difficult to see at speed, so you're going to have to use them kind of as a reference and then just trust your instincts moving on. Following those tire marks a little bit before the end of the curb, we want to get down to second gear as we bleed off speed, getting closer to the apex, and get on the throttle early. I like to get on the throttle right about when I'm facing that orange part of the wall in the distance that we just passed. Be very gentle and gradual with the throttle because it can make you slide, it can make you understeer or oversteer if you're too quick on the throttle, but immediately when you get grip, start turning in and set up for the next corner. The next braking zone, again, there isn't anything really specific, but if you look on the right past the fence, there's a kind of a concrete structure. That's a little difficult to see. You can also look at the tire marks that are on the curb, and right after the beginning of those is a good place to hit the brakes. Once again, the tire marks provide a really good insight as to the kind of line you want to take. You want to hit a very late apex going in here, and of course, as you're trail braking all the way to the apex, at the very last moment, you want to come all the way off the brakes, add a little bit more steering, and then get fully on the throttle once you do hit that clipping point. From here, we pretty much want to draw just a straight line to the next braking point, which is going to be the start of the outside curbing. About halfway from the beginning of the curbing to the first red part of it is when we're going to hit the brakes. Never getting to full braking, I start turning in and trail braking right at the beginning of the red part of the curbing on the inside, trying to get all the way up on the curbing and continuing to steer left, just making sure that we do not go all the way into the green. It's fine to be still turning left as you hit that part on the exit, as long as you don't go all the way in the green, just like I said. For the next corner, we want to trace the line of the outside curbing, and once we start turning in, then we're going to add a little bit of brake, try to clip right after that inside bump on the curbing, and then get back on the throttle as soon as we can. Like always, you can go out onto the green as long as your tires aren't all the way off the red and white. Moving over to the right side of the track, we're going to look for the meter boards, but instead of using one of those before the 100 meter board, this convenient post directly after it actually is when we're going to hit the brakes right on that dark spot of the curbing on the right. Again, avoiding the curb for heavy braking zones like this, we're going to wait till we get to the 50-meter board to shift down to first gear and turn in. Late apex this corner, as soon as you hit that other side of the curb, we're going to get up to second gear and gently get on the throttle, making sure that we do not slide the tires. That will cost you a lot of time. Going straight over the curb on this kink on the inside, we're going to aim for the marshals in the distance, but if you look on the right, there's a dark green patch of what looks like AstroTurf, and at the beginning of that is where we're going to hit the brakes, conveniently right where the tire marks are. Not braking 100%, we want to bleed off speed, get down to second gear, then come fully off the brakes so we can try to apex right after that bump past the curbs. Then gently use maintenance throttle, getting on full throttle as soon as you know that you can do it without going off into the sand. Using the tire marks as a guide again, you can actually see where the green part of the track ends. You want to just barely miss the end of it for the turn in, staying full throttle, shift up to fourth, and then lift just enough so you barely graze these cones. You can actually go straight through them if you hit it right, but it's kind of dangerous. Get back on that throttle and again, abuse as much of the curb as you can. For the final braking point, you can see these marks on the track on the inside right here. That's a good guide for when you're learning it, but again, it's just going to be instinct and taking in as much of the surroundings as you possibly can to know when to brake when you're actually doing the lap or in the race. Make sure you get your tires on the apex all the way up in the curb or you're going to be losing a lot of potential speed. Get back on that throttle, of course, gently. Try to track out as much as you can. And if you're not using all of the exit all the way under the green, you're going to be losing some time. So try to keep as much momentum as you can there. It's very difficult and the timing can be really tricky, but just keep practicing until you got it. Going over at full speed, as I mentioned before, I'm just learning now, thanks to Dino, that you do not want to brake while on the curb, and that's something that I've been doing for years, it's kind of funny that I've gotten as far as I have without knowing that. I did use the curb a little bit on accident, but you'll see on the next really heavy braking zone that I did not use the curb. For the chicane, you'll notice that I cut a lot of the chicane, and when we exited, we didn't have a really great angle going onto this long sweeping corner, so we definitely lost a little bit of speed there. But with that said, this car is nimble enough that you can just turn in, lift off, and you should be able to get on the throttle really early, even if you have kind of a weird angle like I did. A lot of the braking points are in really non-specific areas, but luckily, for whatever reason, probably because of that, a lot of the tire marks on the track give you clues to where you should brake and turn in. A lot of people end up sliding out on this corner right here, and a lot of people slow down too much. You don't really need to trace the same shape as the corner. You just barely need to make sure that you're not going all the way on the green and carry as much speed as you can, and you're good to go. Third gear can work for that previous right-hander that we just went over, but I found that fourth gear helps us keep more momentum. This super slow hairpin is a site of many incidents in the race, and a lot of people end up sliding themselves out. Remember, whenever you go really slow, getting on the throttle, it's going to be really imperative that you are gentle, because these cars are powerful enough to slide the tires, and sliding out at all is going to cost you a lot of time. The penultimate corner is really about keeping as much momentum as you can. The final corner is pretty much the same, however, you should put emphasis on getting on the throttle as early as you can because of the extremely long front straight. Track limits are very sensitive here, so make sure you keep at least 2 tires on the red and white curbing. I actually had a number of really good races with this car throughout my stream today, but each one of them featured kind of a weird or dirty moment that I really didn't want to showcase. So I tried one last race at the very end of my stream, and we had almost a flawless race until the very last lap, but I'm actually going to go over that incident in detail. Most of the time when we have a required pit stop without a required tire change, I choose not to change the tires. And a lot of the cars don't need to change the tires. However, the Jag is pretty slow when you wear out the tires. I do believe some people would be able to take the Jag and not have to take tires, but my tire saving capabilities are not at that level right now. In fact, that kind of tire saving is pretty rare in general, so I figured instead of trying to convince everyone to do that, I would show what we can do if we just go ahead and choose to take tires. It does cost an extra 4 seconds or so, but you will most definitely be able to make that up with the pace that you gain from having fresh tires halfway through the race. Now, I'm not sure what happened there. I'm guessing he just missed a shift, so of course be very careful not to miss a shift. It can be very dramatic, especially on a straight like this. As you can see, I was up to my old habits braking on the curbs. I'd completely forgotten that Dino had given me the tip not to do that before. So it's going to be something that I'm going to be adjusting to. It's probably going to take me a long time to stop doing it in general, but I do believe him when he says that braking on the curbs extends your braking distance, which of course is not good. Noticing that people were bunching up on the inside, I decided to take the outside line, and it ended up being a pretty good decision. I did want to brake later than Arborman wanted to brake, however I was able to brake before hitting him, and we were able to maintain the position that we had just gained from taking the outside line previously. I went for a dive, Arborman kind of turned in on me, but I believe that he was not trying to do that. We gave each other space afterwards, it didn't seem like he was too upset, and I don't think it really ruined the pace of either of us, so I just kept on going with it. I braked later going to that corner, which is something that the Jag is very good at, and we were able to really maintain that position, or really take that position I should say, and it was pretty decisive at that moment. After a pretty eventful first couple corners, it was time to decide what we were going to do with the tire strategy. The pit window is anywhere between lap 4 and 6 for the best possible overall pace, but of course you can stretch out either of the stints if you feel like it's necessary. Like always, the best thing to do is try to go into the pits when you can come out of the pits and not have to deal with any kind of traffic. The Revengel is a guy who had been racing us a lot in the past. We hadn't seen him in a long time, so I was kind of testing out what his pace would be. He hadn't lost a lot of pace, so after realizing I wasn't able to cleanly get in front of him, I decided just to follow him until I could make a really decisive pass. I had a better exit onto the straight, so I went for a pass, but I quickly realized that he was going to maintain the slipstream, so I wasn't going to be able to just go ahead of him there. Slipping in behind, I got a little bit more momentum again, and once again I went for a really deep pass, which of course is gonna be okay as long as you stick to your line and you give space. I'm not sure if he braked early or if he was just gonna let me have that position, but either way we got in front of him pretty cleanly. Shout out to him though, it's really good seeing him in the lobbies again. So once again, I'm thinking about what my pit strategy is gonna be. If I pit a little bit early, it might work out to my benefit, however I might run into traffic because of how far back the people behind me are. At least that's what I thought. In reality, if I go to the pit delta is so long that no one behind me, you can see from the minimap, absolutely no one behind me is going to be anywhere near me. So really I could have just stuck to the original plan and gone into the pits when I was going to initially, which would have been lap 5, but for some reason in my head I thought we were going to go for the overcut and pit lap 6. In the end, a single lap difference when it comes to your stints isn't going to make too much of a difference, so that's what we're going to go for. Dpr Cabrera, who just got the penalty, is actually a pretty quick driver. It was going to be pretty difficult for me to pass him, especially if he was able to stay close to Blackstrap ahead, who was going to provide slip. So I was planning on just staying really close. If a really good opportunity provided itself where I could make a pass, I was going to go for it. But if I really had to fight for it, I was just going to wait until he had to serve that penalty. Now, unfortunately, that was going to be almost an entire lap ahead, but like I said before, Cabrera's pretty quick. I wasn't sure about Blackstrap. I'm not sure if I've ever raced that person before, but the plan right now would be just to follow Cabrera unless he makes a big mistake. We're not going to go for a really big pass, and we could save our tires as well as save ourselves some pace by not trying to battle. And then when he has to serve that penalty, it would be a very easy position gained. I couldn't miss this opportunity, however. If you follow really closely to someone who's making an overtake, it's going to be impossible for the person they're overtaking to then slide in behind them, so it's kind of a free overtake. Like I said before, I'd never really raced Blackstrap, or at least I don't remember racing Blackstrap, so I didn't really quite know what to expect. As I was trying to follow Cabrera in through here, he went for a bit of a dive, or at least I thought he did, so I actually stayed on the outside. I was going to let him go for the dive on the inside because I would still have more momentum and be able to keep up a lot more speed on the outside right there. Again, he went for a late braking move. I'm not sure if he was trying to pass me or if that's just where he brakes, but I was able to maintain more momentum, and following Cabrera, I was able to get away from Blackstrap there. Not only were we now safe from Blackstrap, Cabrera was actually catching close to PDX, which meant that after Cabrera serves that penalty, I might actually be in the slipstream of PDX, and moving onto the straight, that would keep me safe from both Cabrera and Blackstrap behind. A half-second penalty is not a lot, but since we were super close to him, that meant that we were going to be able to get all the way in front of him and not really have to worry about him attacking as soon as he got out of that penalty. Had we passed Cabrera right then and we didn't have someone slipstream in front of us, we were probably going to be in trouble from Cabrera because he's in a much faster car, at least on the straight, and he would have slipstream from me because he was able to stay pretty close. But since we do have PDX Mixmaster, I thought it was important to use the opportunity to use his slipstream on the front straight and potentially go for another pass going into turn 1. I realized pretty quickly that I'd completely underestimated both PDX and the McLaren, and there was no way I was going to have enough momentum to pass him before T1. It did, however, make sure that we didn't have any kind of danger from Cabrera behind. Now, it's not impossible to pass one of the McLarens on the straight. It just requires you to get a very, very good exit and be really close. We didn't have either of those things, so we weren't going to come close to PDX until the braking zone, and that's actually exactly when we did get close. The Jag's brakes are fantastic, and especially with this tune, it's very nimble on corner turn-in. Keeping in mind how good the Jag is under braking and turn-in, you want to use that to your advantage when you're attacking a McLaren. Of course, you've got to make sure that you're not going to run into the back of them, but if you're brave enough, you can get really close on corner entry, and you can stay there mid-corner and corner exit. Now, Mixmaster is a buddy, and so unfortunately when I went for this pass, I think he just went ahead and lifted off and gave us the position. Now, that can be something that is beneficial. If you've got someone who's faster than you, or at least you think they're faster than you, and they're being really aggressive going for a pass, it can eventually actually help you out just to let them go. But of course, there's nothing wrong with just defending and continuing to try to keep your position. So thank you, Mixmaster. I appreciate you giving me that position. You didn't need to, but it obviously did help out here. The rest of that stint went pretty well. We had really good pace, but unfortunately I gave myself a small penalty. Copeland had gone into the pits at the end of lap 4, and we waited until the end of lap 6. My pace was good enough that we came out right behind him, so we were going to be able to use the slip on any of the straights, but unfortunately that penalty was going to make it so we weren't going to be able to attack very soon. Jumping all the way to when we had to serve the penalty, you can see that we were less than half a second away from him when we had to serve it, which meant that we were going to have to start this fight all over again. Catching him in almost the exact same spot, we ended up being very, very close, actually a little bit closer, because this time going through the penalty zone, we might actually be able to go for a pass. I stayed really close, making sure that I carried as much speed as I could through that right-hander, and then it looked like we were definitely going to be able to go for it. Waiting to see exactly where he was going to go, he decided to defend just a little bit, so I went way on the inside. He took the outside line, and unfortunately, he braked a little bit too late, so I was able to get all the way in front. Now, with him taking that outside line, it doesn't actually mean he's not defending. Since he probably trusts me, I assume he trusts me. He's someone that I've raced with for a very long time. If he trusts me not to run into him and he takes the outside line, he's actually going to be able to keep up more momentum, more speed through that hairpin, and he would potentially be able to actually keep his position easier than taking an inside defensive line. The hard part about that kind of defense, though, is it's really millimeter perfect when it comes to the braking, and he just made a tiny mistake, so that was really good racing. It's always good racing with you, Copeland. Now, as you can see, our buddy Girthquake actually waited even longer to go in the pits, which was a really intelligent choice because it looked like I was going to have to battle Copeland, especially from way back then, so by going for an overcut, just keeping as much clean air as possible, he was able to get in front of Copeland as well. I was very lucky to have made that pass on Copeland when I did, because if I didn't, I probably would have ended up behind Girthquake, and then it would have probably been a three-way battle, and who knows what would have happened with that. Now in third place, we had already pit, so we didn't have to worry about anyone else getting in front of us after a pit stop. However, Windfire had also already pit, and since he was 14 seconds ahead and also the fastest person in the lobby, one of the fastest people in the entire region, obviously we weren't going to catch him. Nico Kara, however, had not taken tires, and being only 32 seconds ahead, that meant if I was faster than him for the next couple laps before he went in the pits, I might end up in front of him. And that is how we ended up with the only real incident of this race. Now, obviously I'm biased, so of course I'm going to defend myself if ever there's some kind of incident, but you'll see that I was actually pretty conflicted here. With him coming out there, I was still going to go for an opportunity to try to get in front of him, so I gave him as much space as I could, ended up taking this line, and we collided. Initially, you can see I lifted off the throttle, but as I thought about it more, I felt like I gave him more than enough space and he didn't give me nearly enough, so I just decided to keep going. I have had run-ins with Nico in the past, but most of the time we're okay, we don't argue much, we don't run into each other, so I figured that he wasn't going to be too upset. Unfortunately, he definitely thought of this completely different. He ended up sending me multiple messages, and in the game chat after the race was accusing me of being dirty and saying that I should have given him the position back. I mentioned before, and as you saw, I did lift off the throttle initially thinking about it, but as I was really going over it in my mind, I felt that I gave him enough space and he didn't give me enough space. He thought differently, so I'm actually going to show you what his viewpoint looked like. As he's coming out of the pits, it's obviously very close, but of course I'm not just going to give it up. We both give each other space initially, but then it looks to me like he completely squeezed me on the inside. We're going to go over it in slow-mo. Initially it's fine, but as you can see, as he turns left, he gives me almost no space. He's about a foot away from the curb, and it looks like I'm going to slip off the curb and come off a little bit more than I needed to, but that would have still given him more than a car width. He gave me less than half of a car width off the curb and blamed me. This is something that actually happens a lot in Gran Turismo, and one of the weird things about Gran Turismo physics is it makes cars completely bounce off of each other, where in real life we might just rub against each other and not have that dramatic of a collision. But it's an issue. People like to turn in and collide with cars on the inside and then blame the other one, and it's where a lot of anger and aggression comes from. I would like to hear people's opinions on that. I would like to know what you think. I am 100% satisfied thinking that I gave him more than enough space, but I would like to hear what other people's opinions are. If that's happened to you, if you've done that to someone, if you think it's just a racing incident, if it's my fault, let me know in the comments. Either way, I thought that race was fantastic. That was about as good as we possibly could have done against Windfire, and save for him, we beat absolutely everyone else in the lobby. Thank you again for watching my videos. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be making a new one of these guides every single week. Thank you.